Starting from this small island, Singapore is set to become the largest producer of lab-grown meat in the coming years. The world will soon transition from the traditional meat we know to a new type of meat, which is not sourced from cows or chickens.
So, is this the beginning of the end for the meat as we know it?
The idea of lab-grown food was unveiled over 100 years ago, where bioreactors played a leading role to enable scientists, after thousands of patents, to cook the world's first lab-grown burger in 2013. Many scientists believe that livestock farming is one of the major contributors to global warming. Many scientists also agree that lab-grown meat could contribute to the solution for the global warming problem.
But will lab-grown meat prove to be safer for humanity compared to traditional meat and act as a shield against global warming?
How will this type of meat shape our future in a world where farmland continues to shrink each year? As available farmland decreases, so does the space needed to grow the crops necessary to sustain livestock.
So, would lab-grown meat be the magical solution for this problem?
Could we soon be served lab-grown meat by a humanoid robot at one of the world's most luxurious restaurants, something straight out of a Hollywood movie? Or will it become a staple on supermarket shelves, destined for dinner tables in every home across the globe? This is exactly the vision of Bill Gates, who has invested billions of dollars in future industries, including lab-grown meat.
Hundreds of questions surround bioreactor meat, and the answers are in this video. My name is Bezos and this is World Economy. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest content.
Nowadays, everyone's get meat through the conventional method, which is slaughtering various animals, whether on farms or in factories, a process humans have followed since the dawn of history. It's well known that animals have been the sole source of meat for humans. However, it seems we might soon add another source: lab-grown meat. Before we dive into the topic of lab-grown meat, you need to know that there is a hidden element playing a key role behind the scenes in producing lab-grown meat. That is the bioreactor. So what exactly is a bioreactor? The bioreactor is not a new term. Over the past century, the bioreactor has played a major role not only in producing lab-grown meat, but it has also been crucial in producing medicines like ethanol, acetone, and other compounds, responsible for making most antibiotics. But the bioreactor's capabilities do not stop there. It can also produce milk without cows and honey without bees.
But the question here is, how does the bioreactor do all of these things?
Let's imagine it for a moment. The bioreactor simulates the biological process that happens inside an animal's body, allowing cells to grow in the same way cells grow inside animals' bodies. Essentially, it's a tank where we place stem cells taken from a living animal. These tiny living cells are then cultivated inside the tank. For this to work, the same environmental conditions that are essential for living organisms to grow, such as reproduction, growth, and cell division, must be provided. Just like what happens inside a living animal. To ensure these processes happen naturally, specialized mechanisms are placed inside the bioreactor tank. These are powered by a nutrient-rich aqueous solution filled with vitamins, amino acids, oxygen, and other elements. These components provide the cells with the conditions they need to survive, including proper pH levels and temperature, to create an environment that is as close as possible to natural environments. What's surprising is that to produce this lab-grown meat, additional properties are introduced into the bioreactor tank. These play a crucial role by removing waste produced by cells, mimicking the natural process performed by the liver and kidneys in an animal's body. This is how lab-grown meat or cells that are identical to real animal meat are produced. What's even more amazing is that some laboratories have managed to create a bioreactor with a capacity of up to 20,000 liters. The process starts by growing the cells in small flasks that are specially designed to produce living cells. Once these cells begin to grow outside the flasks, they are transferred to larger containers prepared to allow the living cells to continue multiplying until they reach the harvesting stage. In 1931, Sir Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, said,
"We shall escape the absurdity of growing a whole chicken in order to eat the breast or wing by growing these parts separately under a suitable medium."
Yeah, the idea itself dates back nearly 100 years. From there, a series of manufacturing processes and patents began, continuing to this day. In 1971, the first cultivation of living cells was achieved by pathologist Russell Ross in a muscle fiber laboratory. Between 1998 and 2012, several doctors, research centers, and companies announced their successful ability to produce lab-grown meat. One of the most notable experiments was conducted by NASA in 2001, when experiments were carried out to produce lab-grown meat to provide astronauts with a long-term food source, eliminating the need to store real meat during space missions. By 2012, 30 laboratories around the world announced that they were working in the field of lab-grown meat. In 2013, the first public demonstration of lab-grown meat took place. The first lab-grown burger was cooked and eaten during a large press conference held in London, led by Professor Mark Post, that was cooked by the famous chef Richard McGowan. Several attendees at the conference tasted the burger, including food critic Hani Ritzler, who said,
"I was expecting the texture to be more soft. There is quite some intense taste. It's close to meat, but it's not that juicy. The consistency is perfect, but I miss salt and pepper. This is meat to me. It's not falling apart."
She even confirmed that if she hadn't known that it was a lab-grown burger, she would have thought it was a real one.
But the question here is, are lab-grown meat safe for humans and the environment?
Or what are the benefits humanity would get from eating lab-grown meat? Lab-grown meat laboratories claim that these meats are less likely to be contaminated by bacteria, such as those found in animal feces, and other pollutants, reducing the risk to human health. As global demand for meat contributes to rise, leading to the need for more animals and increased land use, lab-grown meat offers a solution by significantly reducing the need for land and water resources. Raising livestock requires land, water, and energy to grow, harvest, and transport feed to the animals on farms. Shockingly, producing just 1 kilogram of beef requires 25 kilograms of grain to feed the animal and about 15,000 liters of water.
Want more reasons? Sure.
The production of real meat generates large amounts of methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide gases responsible for global warming. The meat industry accounts for about 15% of total global greenhouse gas emissions, which is more than the emissions produced by the entire transportation sector. In contrast, lab-grown meat significantly reduces these emissions. A 2011 study by Oxford University suggests that producing lab-grown meat could reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by 96%, use 98% less land, and consume up to half the energy required to produce traditional meat. By relying on lab-grown meat, there would be no need to sacrifice live animals. Additionally, lab-grown meat can meet all the nutritional needs of consumers, similar to traditionally produced meat. At least, that's what scientists claim. According to researchers, it will be difficult to raise enough animals to meet the entire population's protein needs in the coming years. In this case, lab-grown meat remains a valuable option to meet future human food demands. It's also said that with the ability to modify the fat and cholesterol content in lab-grown meat, it could reduce the risk of chronic diseases.
Wouldn't that be a good reason to give it a try?
This was confirmed by Esha Datar, executive director of the non-profit research institute New Harvest, in her statement regarding lab-grown meat.
We are currently witnessing significant climate impacts caused by animal farming. Therefore, it's better to shift to alternative methods of protein production, as real meat is expected to be phased out soon. Especially since the high density of animals on farms contributes to the emergence of pandemic viruses, such as bird flu and swine flu.
Another factor contributing to lab-grown meat's growing appeal as a future food option is that most vegetarians generally refuse to eat meat due to concerns about animal welfare and their objection to the process of animal slaughtering. This is also why they reject plant-based meat, as they are originally derived from the cells of dead animals. However, they may accept lab-grown meat because it doesn't involve any impact on animal welfare. Therefore, it will serve as a suitable alternative to real meat for them, as technically it contains cells, fats, and muscle tissues derived from real animals. In any case, while it offers benefits, it naturally comes with some drawbacks as well. So, what are the main disadvantages of lab-grown meat? For example, there are concerns that the taste of lab-grown meat may not appeal to all consumers. When this meat is introduced to all markets, some consumers may like it and find it similar to real meat, while others may completely reject its taste. Some studies suggest that cultured cells are more prone to infections, since they don't have the protection of an immune system to fight diseases. Additionally, these meats are not grass-fed, but are nourished with medical glucose and hormonal substances, which could lead to several diseases for those who consume them. There is also the complex process involved in cultivating lab-grown meat, as each cell must be carefully monitored manually throughout the entire process. Therefore, even a minor mistake could lead to the collapse of the entire cell culture. On the other hand, while raising animals is costly, producing lab-grown meat is even more expensive, due to the specialized tools and technologies required. In March 2015, in an interview with ABC Australia, Mark Post stated that the marginal cost of the burger his team produced in the lab in 2013 was €250,000, whereas its actual price was only €8. By 2017, the cost of producing 1 kilogram of meat in the labs of Memphis Meats had reached $40,000. This makes lab-grown meat production very expensive, making it unaffordable for many consumers, especially those in the middle class.
The challenge here is how to produce lab-grown meat in an economically viable way and in quantities large enough to meet consumer demand. This is a question no one has answered yet.
Away from these disadvantages and drawbacks, there are countries that focus solely on the financial benefits, such as Singapore, which is racing against time and doubling its efforts to become the largest producer of lab-grown meat. As of now, it is the only country where lab-grown meat can be purchased from the supermarket, like any other product, since it allowed selling bioreactor meat in consumer stores on December 2, 2020. Although the United States currently relies on lab-grown meat in a few of its restaurants, Singapore embraced it years ago. China is now competing by opening a large lab-grown meat factory in Shanghai to ensure food security for its population of over 1.4 billion people. This factory contains a bioreactor with a capacity of 2,000 liters, capable of producing 1 ton of lab-grown meat annually, with plans to add more bioreactors in the future. But Austria, France, and Italy opposed the idea of producing lab-grown meat during a European Union meeting held this year, citing concerns over the potential risks to human health and the environment. Currently, the European Union is divided between the dangers of lab-grown meat and the benefits supported by Germany, Spain, and the Netherlands. These countries agreed that lab-grown meat will improve food security, reduce emissions, and meet the increasing demand for meat. The same goes for the United States, where Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen issued an executive order aimed at banning lab-grown meat by 2025, following in the footsteps of Florida State Governor Ron DeSantis. Amidst supporters and opponents, it's important to note that the revenue of the overall alternative meat market in 2024 is $336 billion, including lab-grown meat. It's expected that this figure will increase annually at a rate of 5% to reach $430 billion by 2029, with lab-grown meat production expected to reach 41 billion kilograms by the same year. So, if lab-grown meat expands to global markets, the size of lab-grown meat economy will keep growing day by day. It's not far-fetched that some countries will rise by producing larger quantities of lab-grown meat in the future. Regardless of the current production problems of lab-grown meat, which countries are trying to overcome, there are expectations that demand will double by 2050. Currently, there are many major investors interested in this field, led by Bill Gates, the former CEO of Microsoft, and one of the richest people on the planet. He has invested in several alternative protein companies to promote lab-grown meat. One of his most famous statements, as reported by CNBC, was,
"I think these products will eventually be very good, even though their share is small today."
He confirmed that innovations in this field are crucial steps toward reducing animal consumption, emphasizing that lab-grown meat is one of the industries of the future. He also claims that it's one of the solutions to combat global warming. In one of his statements, he said,
"The key to addressing the climate issue is to make clean products as affordable as their polluting counterparts across all major emissions sectors such as aviation, concrete, and meat production. Only by achieving this can we realistically expect all countries to adopt meaningful changes."
Recently, Jeff Bezos, the founder and CEO of Amazon, joined Gates in supporting lab-grown meat. In April, he surprised the world by revealing his plan to establish Bezos Centers of Sustainable Protein with an investment of $60 million, which will focus on creating alternative proteins and expanding sustainable food production. Overall, investors have poured nearly $3 billion into this industry, with production facilities being built to create lab-grown beef and chicken like never before. Among these investments, $17 million has been given in the form of research grants to various programs working on lab-grown meat by the Good Food Institute, a non-profit organization focused on developing animal product alternatives.
The question here is, what would happen to farmers and their animals if lab-grown meat becomes very widespread?
In the early 19th century, animals roamed freely on small family-run farms before making their way to the kitchen table. Back then, people consumed relatively modest amounts of meat compared to modern days. Now, the landscape has completely shifted. Farming has evolved into large-scale industrial operations, with some countries heavily dependent on this industry, competing to meet the ever-increasing consumer demand. The days of green pastures and happy animals on small farms are long gone. To answer the question we raised, we will have to wait, as the outlook is still unclear. However, it's expected that this will reduce the overall number of animals raised, though not eliminate them entirely. Farmers will still need to grow the proteins and crops that become feed for growing cells, and lab-grown meat producers will still need cells from living animals to continue producing lab-grown meat. So is it possible that lab-grown meat will make its way to every table and into every home as naturally as real meat? The answer to this question depends on the future itself. Will lab-grown meat compete with real meat and take its place? Or will it remain a secondary option on some tables in certain countries? Let's think about it for a moment. Since we are in a world with limited resources, bioreactors have become a crucial tool for those looking for more sustainable ways to meet the growing food demand without raising or slaughtering animals, or potentially causing a global war, a nuclear disaster, or climate catastrophe. If you have reached this point of this video, you might have thought of sci-fi movies. Many of these movies do feature manufactured meat or even synthetic water, but there is a slight difference here. Most films have their scenarios focused on creating synthetic meat or water either because they are preparing for the end of the world or leaving Earth because it's no longer suitable for living. Consequently, they start looking for ways to sustain life by producing synthetic meat and water to keep humanity going. So will this scenario move into our real lives? And will we become more reliant on this type of manufactured meat at a time when we are already closer to sci-fi movies? Who would have ever thought that AI would advance to this level, or that robots would become so human-like? Speaking of movies, there's a documentary about lab-grown protein called Meet the Future. It talks about Dr. Uma Veliti, an Indian cardiologist and the founder of Memphis Meats, a company producing lab-grown meat. The film shows that Veliti, who loved science like his father, moved from India to the US to study and work. He was always bothered by the idea of slaughterhouses and the meat chilling process, viewing it as a cruel practice for animals. From there, he started thinking about finding a solution, leading him to experiment with growing meat in the lab. Although he didn't know where this crazy idea would take him, he eventually went from having a small team and a dream to becoming the CEO of a company that raised $180 million of funding. So, don't think it's far-fetched or that it will take many years to happen. Speed is crucial right now because lab-grown meat isn't just a future concept. It's already here and could reshape everything we know about food, health, and the environment.
Whether you are excited or skeptical, do you think lab-grown meat would be on our plates anytime soon? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to receive notifications about our future videos.